Grateful to have Council President Hardin, Councilmember Shayla Favor, Bo Chilton, who is the CEO from Impact Community Action as well, joining us here to speak and share a little bit this morning. And I want to welcome everybody as we talk about a very important subject, CARES Act funding in the community. As you all know, for the last 8 weeks, the city's been focused on addressing the immediate public health crisis that is COVID-19. Together, we have made tremendous sacrifices to slow the spread of the virus, and I am grateful to the people of Columbus and our neighbors across the state for that commitment. We have saved thousands of lives in this community and across of our state, and prevented tens of thousands more from falling ill. Together, we have flattened the curve. And now we continue to guard against a surge in new cases as we slowly lift some of the restrictions and shift our focus to the looming human service crisis and prepare for a dynamic, inclusive economic recovery through the lens of equity. Over the last several weeks, the city has increased support for organizations working to meet the basic needs and to ease the burdens of our residents. We've invested $1 million with the Community Shelter Board, $500,000 with the YMCA, $400,000 for Life Care with Life Care Alliance for senior meals, $125,000 with the Columbus Urban League for technology assistance for small businesses. In addition, we have incurred significant unplanned costs to provide COVID-19 related services, including overtime for police, fire, and Columbus Public Health, personal protective equipment, or PPE, and other essential supplies necessary to protect our employees and the public, and technology to allow city employees to work remotely while maintaining core city services. We know that costs will continue to mount, both for the city and for our residents. And the CARES Act funding will help Columbus weather the current public health crisis and position our residents, our neighbors, with position towards recovery. We have received $157 million in CARES Act funding from the U.S. Department of Treasury. These funds must be used for expenditures directly related to the city's response to COVID-19 and cannot be used to replace revenue. At this point, I'd really like to thank our outstanding congressional delegation, in particular, Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, in her advocacy on behalf of the city through the CARES Act, and she and Speaker Pelosi's proposal just released this week for additional support for local governments, state and local governments around the country. We are fortunate to have such an outstanding Congresswoman representing us. I also want to thank Sherrod Brown and Rob Portman. They wrote a joint letter to Secretary Mnuchin at the Department of Treasury and got them engaged in helping provide more flexibility and clarity specifically to these dollars that we're talking about here today. And I want to thank Senators Portman and Brown for their bipartisan support. We've decided to divide these CARES Act funding into 3 categories to best serve the needs of the community. $80 million for direct spending for COVID-19 expenses, including expanded access to testing and contact tracing and investigations, EMS response, and PPE. $51 million for human services such as shelter for those experiencing homelessness, food and rental assistance. And finally, $26 million for our economic recovery, including small business assistance technology for teleworking, and direct financial support of key sectors of our economy. In a few moments, Councilmember Shayla Faber will share with you a new effort to help meet one of our most basic needs: safe, stable housing. In the coming weeks, we will announce additional programs to support Columbus families during this crisis, guard against future surges in COVID-19, position our community for economic recovery, and emerge from this global pandemic stronger and more resilient. I want to thank Councilmember Faber. She wrote me several weeks ago about this approach, and I want to thank her for her leadership and the work that she's done with Director Stevens and our team to put forth a proposal that she'll discuss in a few minutes. Neighbors, this public health crisis is not over. We must be smart about how we go about our daily lives and make sure that when we do leave our homes to go to work or to the grocery, that it is truly necessary. And if we choose to go to retail establishments or restaurants, we must be considerate of those around us. We must continue to practice social distancing, wear face coverings in public, and wash our hands frequently. This will help keep you healthy and well and help protect our family, friends, and our neighbors. It is now my pleasure to introduce our great partner and the leader of Columbus City Council, our President Shannon Hardin.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me all right?
Hear you well.
Well, I just first want to say thank you to yourself, Mayor Ginther, for your leadership, but for your collaboration and your partnership through these last couple of months. And be remiss not to recognize our Health Commissioner, Mashika Roberts, and all the folks on the front line who have supported us. Certainly want to recognize my colleagues, Council Members Remy, Dorrance, Mitch Brown, Tyson, Councilmember Faber, who we'll hear from shortly, and our President Pro Tem, Elizabeth Brown. I also want to echo your just sincere thanks to our congressional delegation for moving the CARES Act forward. The truth is that the federal legislation is what allows us the opportunity to be here today. I'd also like to give a special shout out to Senator Sherrod Brown for sponsoring the $100 billion emergency rental assistance bill, as well as our Congresswoman Joyce Beatty for her work to fix the holes in the Paycheck Protection Program. Before diving into Council's legislative response, I want to focus for a moment on the context of this virus. Coronavirus is a crisis, but it's also layered on top of an economic system that is not designed to work for everyone. The first folks filing for unemployment were folks bussing tables at local restaurants and people who didn't feel safe driving for Uber or Lyft anymore. Research shows that during the Great Recession from 2007 through 2011, 1/4 of American families lost at least 75% of their wealth. The data is clear that folks without college degrees, poorer folks, and people of color watched more of their wealth disappear than their wealthy, degree-bearing counterparts. And this has led to a substantial rise in wealth inequality in just a few years. We could be facing that same danger today. And now the city of Columbus as an entity is better positioned than many cities, given our strong leadership, our diversified economy, a rainy day fund, and large number of folks that can work from home. But many families don't have a rainy day fund, and I know my office continues to get calls from folks who have yet to receive their stimulus check. There's a tension between the enormous need that faces Columbus families and the fact that things aren't going to get better quickly. We want to fill every gap tomorrow, but we also recognize that this new reality is here until we get a vaccine. I'm extremely grateful that the city of Columbus has received more than $150 million for COVID response. However, let's not fool ourselves to think that these dollars will be able to fill all the needs that exist in our community. So how do we balance the immediate urgency and long-term repercussions of COVID? I believe this requires us to take a short-term and long-term approach. In the short term, we got to keep families in their homes. We got to ensure small businesses can reopen based on the public health guidance and when they feel safe. We have to protect workers who can't work from home and need to put on a mask each and every morning. In the long term, we need to stabilize the economy, rebuilding our city with stronger foundation for families and working people. It's that short-term and long-term view in mind that council is advancing this $3 million of support to help families pay their rent and stay in their homes. This is the first in a series of legislative actions that council plans to advance in coordination and partnership with the mayor and the community. We'll also be examining how to support nonprofits, particularly in the human service area. Those nonprofits are being asked to do more with less, and the city of Columbus will ensure that those organizations can continue to serve our residents. Through all of this, council will be listening and working to support families. I want to thank Finance Chair Elizabeth Brown for her collaboration and leadership, as well as the rest of my colleagues on council for their work to move this legislation forward. At this point, and I like to echo the mayor, I'd like to pass things over to Councilmember Favor to share details on this program. I am so proud and so appreciative of her leadership. It has been her intellectual force that has got us to this point in collaboration with the development department and her team. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our Chair of Housing, Councilmember Favor.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mayor Ginther and your team, including Director Michael Stevens, for your leadership and support as we have advocated strongly for this plan. I'd also like to thank Council President Hardin for his leadership, as well as each of my colleagues at Council who have all been working hard and collaborating during this time as well. Prior to the onset of COVID-19 and the pandemic, increasing affordable housing, decreasing evictions, and ensuring Columbus residents have a safe place to call home were an important part of my work here at Council. And here we are today, where the pandemic has drastically determined how critical it is to shelter in place, to stay safe, even as families struggle with job and financial losses beyond their control. It has simply made our work in the area of housing that much more important as families try to figure out how they will pay bills, feed their families, and avoid devastating eviction or a set out that can lead to homelessness. There have been over 1,200 evictions filed since the court stopped hearings in March, and that number is expected to grow as the court prepares to reopen on June 1st. That's why we have been working closely with our housing partners across the city to fully understand the emergency needs of our community and develop a plan to utilize these dollars from the CARES Act to provide direct assistance to our residents. I am happy to announce today that we will be putting a portion of these dollars towards eviction prevention and housing stabilization by doing the following. First, we will be allocating $250,000 to the Legal Aid Society of Columbus to help increase the capacity of the Tenant Advocacy Project to provide legal representation to tenants facing an eviction. This funding will support 5 additional attorneys at eviction court. Tenants with legal representation are much more likely to avoid an eviction judgment and keep possession of their homes than unrepresented tenants. In addition to these primary efforts, a right to counsel offers several secondary benefits to defendants who are sued for eviction. Attorneys may be able to keep eviction filings off tenants' records, arrange for alternative housing, negotiate reasonable amounts of time for tenants to move out, reduce or eliminate money owed to the landlord, or help tenants apply for rental assistance. Thank you to Ben Horn with the Legal Aid Society of Columbus for his partnership in this effort. Next, we will be allocating $100,000 to community mediation services to assist individuals and families with eviction prevention, conflict management, and mediation services who are currently homeless or at imminent risk of becoming homeless due to COVID-19 or the economic impact of the pandemic, in order to help them maintain stable housing. I want to thank Shelley Wallen and her team at CMS for their partnership in this work. And finally, what I think and what most experts across the country would agree is essential at this time is that we will be allocating $2.65 million for tenant-based rental assistance to Impact Community Action. Impact will assist us by distributing these dollars to other rental assistance partners throughout our community, helping to ensure residents in greatest need across our city, from seniors to veterans and low-income residents, all have access to these critical funds. I will allow Bo Chilton with Impact to talk a little bit more about their program, how it works, and who they will partner with. But I wanted to once again thank every single one of our partners for coming together quickly and efficiently in this time of great need to get assistance to our residents. Our goal here is simple. We want to keep families in their homes. These are difficult times for our community, but I know that with all of the amazing and skilled partners we have at the table to share in getting this work done, we will grow stronger and have positive outcomes for our residents. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Bo Chilton to discuss Impact's rental assistance program. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I am honored to be here today to talk to you about the work of Impact Community Action and our partners in the Housing Stabilization Coalition. Some of those partners include the Columbus Urban League, Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority, the Columbus Women's Commission, Franklin County Job and Family Services, Legal Aid Society, Physicians Care Connection, Southside Thrive, and Affordable Housing Alliance, and a number of other partners. We've come together, and we really have to give a debt of gratitude to Jeff Beal, who's been a leader and a facilitator in bringing us together to have a comprehensive and coordinated approach to solving what is going to be an eviction crisis coming our way. Impact Community Action is not just a name, but an ideal to achieve. We must impact community action now more than ever. We need to embody the phrase, "We are all in this together." These are not just words, but words to live by. And our actions speak louder than our words. I want to thank Mayor Ginther, President Harden, Housing Chair Favor, and the other members of council for their leadership. You all mobilized swiftly and took decisive action. Because of your vision, because of your efforts, we will flatten the wave of evictions that are coming. But make no mistake, a storm is coming our way. Right now, we have 1,200 evictions that are sitting with Franklin County Municipal Court today. We know that there are going to be many more coming once the moratorium is lifted on June 1st. The question is, will it be a wave that can be managed through our relief efforts and coordinated response, along with the cleanup that will be needed in the aftermath, or will it be a tsunami that makes the recovery all the more challenging? I believe our community has truly embraced the words that we are all in this together, and that we will flatten the wave. But there are going to be some hard times ahead, and I certainly don't want to paint too rosy a picture. But I do believe in the Columbus way. I do believe in one Columbus prosperity for all. And I do believe that we are all in this together. And so the Housing Stabilization Coalition has come together to create a coordinated and comprehensive response. It started with the coalition coming together under the leadership and facilitation with Jeff Beal, and it's grown. Once we Impact Community Action got word that we would be recipients of some CARES Act dollars, we decided to allocate $1 million towards a collective effort. We wanted to challenge our community to provide matched dollars so that we could create a fund for $2 million. The response has been overwhelming. It has been very positive. We went to partners like Homeport, who had $200,000 in reserve to be able to assist residents, and we said we will match those dollars. Then we started hearing from other partners who had matched dollars. We then went to the funders and said, we want to try and provide this fund of $2 million, and I'm happy to say that through the efforts of the City of Columbus, organizations like the Columbus Foundation, the United Way, and a host of other private sector foundations and individual donations, we've been able to leverage that $1 million into $5 million. And this truly is an example of the Columbus way. the way in which our community has come together to help mobilize and take a systemic approach to solving this problem. With these dollars, we are going to be able to serve about 2,500 customers over the next 4 months. We're going to be coordinating with Job and Family Services, PRC, who will be able to serve an additional 1,000 people. We know that this will not be quite enough to solve all of the gaps, as President Harden alluded, but this is a big, big step towards helping to manage that wave. Going forward, we have also created a model to help stabilize our nonprofit network. We created a fee-for-service model so that each of our partners will receive a fee for every application that they process, a $100 fee. So if they process 25 applications in a week, they will receive a check for $2,500. That's earned revenue that can be used in a flexible way. This is a way that we can serve many customers all at once because we'll have multiple access points distributed throughout our community, working with our eviction prevention network. And we'll be able to provide some dollars that will help to stabilize them and fill gaps. That earned revenue becomes an unrestricted resource for dollars that the agencies dearly need. And so we're very happy to work with our partners and to work with our partners with legal aid and community mediation services, as we are going to reach out to all of those people who currently have evictions being filed against them. And we want to try and negotiate to see if we can keep them in their homes and make sure that we're being safe during this public health crisis. Thank you again to the members of council and to you, Mayor Ginther, for your leadership, for your quick and decisive actions. Because of it, we are preparing to launch this program on June 1st and really put a dent in flattening the wave. Thank you.
Thank you, Bo, and thank you, President Harden, Councilmember Faber. Before we wrap things up and open up questions, there are a couple of things I want to reinforce or mention. We've been engaged with landlords through the Columbus Apartment Association. Obviously, the last thing landlords want to have happen is have evictions take place, because obviously it costs them money, and the issues of cleanup, particularly in the COVID-19 environment, of units, and then finding new renters for those places. They actually have been actively engaged in this process and are very supportive of this approach. So I want to acknowledge the Columbus Apartment Association and landlords that have been working with us proactively on this. And I think the real heart of this, and maybe we haven't made this direct connection thus far, I'll make it now, that housing instability can be a leading contributor to the public health crisis. So just think about it for a second. You know, at the beginning of this crisis, Michelle Heritage from the Shelter Board told us that 1,000 new neighbors had applied for shelter through the Shelter Board. Folks that had not been homeless before. These are folks that might have been living with family members or neighbors or couch surfing, that at the beginning of this crisis had been told to move on and move along because of concern of the spread. So, you know, in addition to the social distancing and the additional shelters that have been put in place to make sure those neighbors were safe, if you think about it for a second, you know, Bo mentioned 2,500, the number 1,200 evictions. You start thinking about and that's households. Those individuals might have households 4 or 5 people. So we're talking about thousands and thousands of our neighbors, if we did nothing, would be homeless and may have trouble finding housing. And the way that transiency would contribute to the spread and our concerns around the public health crisis, there's a direct correlation between housing security and the public health crisis that we're in right now. And we know, as Councilmember Faber said, the more we can do to keep people in their housing, we can keep them secure, safe, and also protect the community. So it's really important to remember these aren't just evictions and numbers, these are neighbors, and we need to stay focused on that. The last thing I want to share today is that I'm forming a recovery and resiliency advisory group to help Columbus bounce back from the economic downturn caused by the pandemic and prepare for the next crisis. I'm gathering the top minds from many sectors to guide this work, and we'll announce this group in the coming weeks. I've already talked with Council President Hardin and Commission President O'Grady, who have agreed to serve. Now I'd like to open it up to questions. You should all have received instructions via the media alert, but let me go through them quickly. You should see a hand button next to your name. Click on that to raise your hand. We'll unmute you one at a time to answer your questions. Be sure to unclick the hand after we've answered the questions, and certainly click it again if you have another question. I'll also let you know that Development Director Mike Stevens and Finance Director Joe Lombardi are on the line and available for any more specific questions regarding our announcements today. But turn it over to the press, and you just introduce yourself and your organization and ask your question.
Hi there. This is Nick Evans from WOSU. I know that we've been talking quite a lot about the money related to housing, but based on what I've heard, it sounds like that's about $3 million, right? So it's not like an enormous chunk of this. And I know Councilmember Favor, you were I covered your event at Impact in October last year. We put in 300,000 then. Now it's 2.65 million. Is that nearly enough? I mean, like, I know Mr. Chilton said, this is going to affect 2,500 people, but it seems like we're going to have quite a bit more than that. Is there more that needs to be done? Like, is this sort of like a first wave? Is there more coming? I would direct that to Councilmember Favor, if I could.
Good morning, Nick, and thank you for your question. As Council President Hardin, I believe he stated in his remarks, we see this, the rollout of today's plan as being the short-term response that is absolutely needed given the fact that our courts reopen June 1st. And so with the receipt of the dollars from the CARES Act, not that long ago, the work that myself and my team, my colleagues and I have been putting in, as well as the excellent work of the members of the Housing Stabilization Coalition. All of those efforts have come together very quickly to roll something out in time to address the immediate needs of those who will be due in court in 2 weeks. So quick answer is that this, in my opinion, would be a short-term response. And that's why I'm excited about the mayor's commitment to the new group of folks, the new committee that will be tasked with coming up with the long-term strategy on how to distribute those funds in order to address the needs of our community.
I'd like to thank you, Council Member. I'd like to add on to that. I absolutely agree. And Director Stevens may want to speak with a little more detail about this approach, but this would really be focused on June and July. This immediate need that we know of based on the evictions that are on hold and other evictions that will be filed come the beginning of June and into July. And so the thought was, let's approach this and help those families. As many evictions as we can prevent, the more we can do to keep people in their homes, the more we wanted to focus on in these first couple of months. But Councilmember Favor is absolutely right. There are going to be a couple of things that we're going to do right away, but our longer term plan. So think about some of the things we're going to do over the next 1 to 3 months with this CARES Act funding. The city's already incurred nearly $7 million worth of costs directly associated with COVID-19. We don't anticipate that will go down, but over the next 1 to 3 months, what do we need to do? And then this Recovery and Resiliency Advisory Group made up of folks from across the community will have us continue to look through an equity lens on how we go about our longer term approach in recovery. So I don't know, Director Stevens, do you have any additional comments?
I do not. I think you covered that really well. We are focused on the immediate need while we're also planning to deal with the long-term impact.
Any other questions from the press or a follow-up?
I guess I may just be the only one here, but one of the things that jumps out at me, I know that there's a lot of I've heard from a lot of folks that the guidance from Treasury on this has been problematic and it's made it difficult to figure out how to actually use this money and what expenditures would be allowable under it. It sounds like the city isn't having a significant amount of trouble with that, but I'm curious how big a challenge that's been for you as you've tried to divvy this money up. And then also, I'm curious if you could tell us a bit more about the bucket going to direct spending for COVID-19 expenses. So like the $80 million chunk of this, how much of that is going to past expenses and how much is going toward stuff looking forward? And give me a little bit more sense of like what those particular expenditures will be.
Well, I'll take a stab at it, but probably Director Lombardi, who's had direct conversations with the Department of Treasury, can speak to those conversations as well as what costs we've incurred currently and how we anticipate those moving forward. I'll tell you that this is a place where, as I mentioned, Senators Brown and Portman have been very helpful. They co-authored a letter to Secretary Mnuchin, and he and his staff have continued to work with our team to help clarify and share information. They have been, I think, very receptive to flexibility, understanding that maybe the way the CARES Act was originally written may have been more restrictive than they are interpreting it. And so they've been very helpful for us to figure out ways that we can use these resources to invest, obviously recoup costs that have come directly to the city, but also thinking about services that we've provided in the past that are going to look very differently moving forward. Our hope is that today the governor will give us the green light on rethinking our summer programming for young people. Obviously, that's going to cost much more and look very differently than it has in the past because our top priority is protecting the safety and health of the young people and the employees in rec and parks offering that. So that's just one example. But Director Lombardi, do you want to talk a little bit about our conversations with the Department of Treasury and the types of things we have spent money on out of the CARES resources and things we anticipate moving down the line?
Sure. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. I'm still getting used to the technology. So as the mayor indicated, initially, there was a lot of restrictions on the use of the funds, but after several conversations with a variety of cities on those phone calls, there is less restriction to use of this money. We have spent, a substantial amount of money, as the mayor said, nearly $7 million currently on COVID-related items such as cleaning services, PPE, social distancing efforts. And those are the type of things we'll continue to spend the money on as we move forward. We are going to gather a group here in my department that will look at what we've spent and are those eligible to be reimbursed. And then the next phase will be to reach out to some of our departments who would have an immediate need, such as health for testing, contact tracing, also rec and parks as they begin to look at their modified summer programs and the needs they would have for those programs. And then obviously working with Director Stevens on the human services and economic recovery dollars. So that's where we are, and that's where I think we're heading with this as we move through the next phase of this dollars.
Any other questions from the press? If there are any additional questions, and obviously Council President Harden, Councilmember Favor, myself, the directors are available. If members of the press have questions as they continue to cover this, feel free to reach out to Robin Davis in the communications office, and we'll get you answers as quickly as we can. Thanks everybody for joining us, and have a good rest of the day.